This is Baljinder Singh Rathour, and I do welcome Shuan. She's an Irish lawyer. Welcome, Shuan, to London.
Thank you, thank you. Very nice to be here.
Just brief about yourself, then we'll talk about the Irish immigration. What exactly you have been doing in Ireland in this immigration side.
Okay. Well, I've been doing a lot of applications under EU treaty rights, student applications, visitors visas, investor visas, but there's been, there has been a moratorium put on them at the moment to be reviewed in 12 months to 18 months when they will come back online again, and that would be business investment visas as well as the EU treaty rights visas. But a lot of my work at the moment is on EU treaty rights, which would be EU citizens establishing their rights in another EU country and requesting that family members join them in their new country of residence.
So the EU treaty rights, so the sponsor could be a British person or anyone from the European Union?
Anybody within the European Union that holds a European passport. That would be the sponsor, and then the application would be made for a non-EU or non-EEA family member to join the EU citizen in the country that they're now residing in.
So any person who is not living in Europe, any relatives out of the European countries, they can join their families here.
Exactly.
So when we talk about the relatives, what relations could taken
well,
care of?
There's two different, there's qualifying family members and there's permitted family members. Now, qualified family members are direct bloodline, so that you would work from the applicant, it would be the mother and father moving upwards in the bloodline, or son and daughter moving downwards. So they're the qualifying family members. Permitted family members are any other family relationship. So that would be brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces, brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws. The only difference really is the evidence required for the permitted family members, which are not the direct bloodline. There'd be a lot more evidence required, because the fact the applications are based on dependency and a member of the household. It's not difficult to prove a mother and father is dependent if they're of a certain age, or that a son and daughter is dependent, because if they're under 21, they're at college, they're dependent on their parents. It then gets difficult when it comes to brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces, because you have to have solid evidence that the applicant needs the sponsor to live their day-to-day living. So,
a person who is having an Irish passport, he can't get this EU treaty done?
he can in any other country apart from Ireland.
Okay, so that's how it
would
works.
be the same. Somebody with a British passport cannot apply for EU treaty rights within Britain.
Britain, he have to.
But he'd have to move to Ireland, France, Germany, Spain, any of the 26 European countries.
Why do you think is Ireland is preferable than other EU countries for immigrants? Instead of applying in any other EU country, they prefer Ireland. What would be?
I think it's the language. It's the other English-speaking nation. Most people will learn English as a second language. They'll have their natural language, and they would learn English would be taught in schools as another language. You wouldn't see, especially say in Asian countries, in South American countries, where a lot of the applications that I would be making, the English would be their second language. It wouldn't be German, it wouldn't be,
any other European
Dutch,
language.
any other European language, because English is the language of business, it's the language of
international
commerce and
yeah,
everything else.
yeah.
Yeah.
So moving back to that relatives, what documents you think you require to prove the relations?
Well, the original documents would be the birth certificates. You would have to show the relationship. So say I was making an application for a niece, okay? I would need my birth certificate I would need my sister or brother, whoever was the parent of the niece. I would need their birth certificate. I would then be able to show that myself and the mother of my niece or the father were brother and sister, and then the birth certificate of the applicant itself. You might need to get my parents' birth certificate, the applicant's parents' birth certificate, so you would have 4 birth certificates that would be needed. If it's through marriage, you would need original marriage certificate. Now, marriage certificates can be quite difficult. The marriage certificate must be the recognised civil certificate from the country that the person was married in. I've come across difficulties where it's been the religious ceremony certificate, which is not accepted as proof of marriage. It has to be through the registry office.
British marriage, register of marriage.
The civil certificate,
Sorry.
not just the religious one.
Understand.
It's the same in Ireland, you get a religious certificate, but you also have a
Okay.
civil certificate.
Understood.
So that's very important, because people come with their, from their mosque or from whatever their certificate that they've received there, but it is not sufficient to prove marriage. So say I wanted my spouse to join me, and I'm a British citizen and I've married someone who's not an EU national. The marriage certificate must be the civil certificate, because they won't accept the religious ceremony certificate.
So one could the birth certificates and the marriage certificates to establish the relation.
The
Yeah.
relationship.
And what about the dependency? I mean, how they can show that the person, the relative who is non-EU, they are dependent on the EU citizen or a British citizen. How we prove that?
The first thing is the financial. You must be able to show financial dependency. So, you know, there must be a paper trail of money going from the applicant, from the sponsor to the applicant, whether it be to their home country or whether it be to a bank account here. There must be receipts. It's very, very strict on the evidence for dependency. The other thing would be that they lived, the dependency that the sponsor paid all the bills for the applicant. So if they're living in the same house, that the utility bills would be in the sponsor's name, showing I've paid the electricity, I have paid the telephone, I've paid a mobile phone. If they come over to the UK as students, receipts showing that the applicant paid the money, or the sponsor paid the money on behalf of the applicant. Yearly train tickets, you know, anything that shows that the sponsor has paid out for the applicant, and the applicant couldn't do these things because they've no money of their own.
By themselves.
Yeah.
So I mean, if the relative overseas is mature, maybe 25, 35, something like that, so then they have to show all sort of dependency throughout the time period by the time they apply.
Exactly. As time has gone on, and as I say, immigration in Ireland is quite a new concept. So the actually immigration service themselves are learning as they go along. So the criteria seems to be constantly changing. So if I have a relative outside of the EU and they're mature, I would be advising the sponsor to show me continuous, maybe from they were 10, 15, or from the sponsor came to live in the UK and was financially stable, that they were sending money home to their family on a continuous basis. 4, 5, 6 years, as long as, the more evidence you have, the stronger your application will be. If you are only starting to send money in the last 3 months, well, the question could be asked, what happened from that person was born till they reached the age of 26 or 27? How come suddenly you're now sending money? How did they live in those intermediate years? So you need to have a genuine reason, whether it could be a death of a parent, whether it could be illness, whether they just couldn't work anymore and now they've become dependent on the sponsor.
So moving from here to, if the British person has to, I mean, any British person or any EU national, they have to be in Ireland,
In Ireland,
and
yes.
they were working there, staying there to prove that they are living in Ireland, only then they can sponsor this.
Yeah, the concept of EU treaty rights is an EU citizen has moved to another EU country and is exercising their treaty rights in that country. Now, to exercise your treaty rights, you must be living and working in the country that you've moved. So the evidence that the Irish immigration look for are tenancy agreements. There's a PRTB letter, which is a Private Residential Tenancies Board letter. And in Ireland, every landlord by law is required to register his tenants. And based on the registration of the names on the tenancy agreement, a letter is automatically sent out to the tenant. That establishes tenant rights. So that if there's any problem down the line, the tenant has rights, he's registered as a tenant. Your utility bills, and then it would be your job. You would have your pay slips, your contract of employment, bank statement showing your wages being paid into your bank account. So as much evidence that you can provide that you're exercising those treaty rights, the stronger your application would be.
What evidence will be required from the person who wants to move in, apart from the relation and dependency?
This would be the sponsor or the applicant?
The applicant who wants to move into, what other documents will be required from them?
Any documentation that shows the sponsor and the applicant have been living at the same address. Polling registration, council tax bills, mobile phone bills, bank statements, and the longer the history of those documents, the stronger the application. 3 months may seem 18 months ago would have been great. Now you need 3-4 years. They also ask things like P60s of the sponsor, tax documentation prior to coming to Ireland. So that would show that the sponsor was not a burden on the previous state, so the previous country. What they want to see is that if somebody comes to Ireland, it's not going to cost the economy, the country, money. If somebody is working, they want proof that they've had an income, their P60s, pay slips, even their contract of employment with their job while they're in the UK. You know.
And the time frame, I mean, how long we take to
I would recommend at least 12 months of documentation, minimum of 12 months of prior to coming to Ireland. And they ask for immediately prior. So if you have evidence in June and you move to Ireland in December and you've no documentations from June to December, that's not immediately prior, so there's a gap. The timeline, there must be no gaps in the timeline of the evidence that you're providing, because the applicant could be working at that stage. So then their EU treaty rights diminishes because they're not dependent. That's the grounds on the application, that the non-EU citizen is dependent on the EU citizen. Once you can't prove dependency, your application will fail.
Now, moving to the final arena, I would say the Brexit. How this is going to affect the application, because people are worried that still this EU treaty is going to prolong, or how much time the people have, because this is the right time if you want to use this treaty for British citizens.
Well, the Brexit, obviously there was a vote to leave the EU. Now, until the British government activate Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, and they have to go to Europe and say, we are activating our rights under Article 50, which means we want to leave the EU. The time starts running from then. So if they don't activate Article 50 to this time next year, it's 2 years from the date of the activation of Article 50. So the minimum, say as from today, is 2 years. The max could be 10 years. If they never activate Article 50, they effectively are not leaving the EU. They may leave it in trade or in different ways, but Article 50 must be activated before the extinguish of EU treaty rights for British citizens.
So, as you said, from now onwards, still we got 2 years to make up this application.
Yes, yes.
Any final word to our viewers, Srina?
Not really. I'm here, and it's lovely to be over and meet you. And as I say, they can contact you if there's any further questions or anybody else.
Yes, of course. And possibly she will be visiting once a month to us. Any clients within the UK or any part of the world, if they want to come to telephone or Skype, we can have a briefing on this one. Thank you very much for visiting us.
Thank you for having me.
No. Thank you.
Hey, what are you doing outside?
I can't travel inside. I don't have visa.
Why you want to enter the country illegally when there's legal ways?
My visa was refused. Please tell me where you got your visa.
Go to Lie Immigration.
What?
Lie Immigration.
Thanks. I will jump in Lie's office.
If you wish to come to UK or you want to extend your visa, then do contact Lie Immigration.
We also deal in business visa, work permits and student visa.
We also handle detention cases, deportation, human rights, asylum and appeals.
We also specialize in Canada and Europe immigration.
Feed Lie, trust Lie.